Today we're going to put together a little maintenance video, just kind of going over some preventative things to look out for from front to back on the mobile units. From the compressor output, it's going to go into the condensing fan. This fan's here really, what it does, it cools the air off. Air coming out of a compressor is always generally around about 100 degrees over ambient. Just takes a lot of energy to compress that air, so it comes out pretty hot. The fan, they have a toggle switch on them on the front side. If you flip that switch, it's going to turn the fan, start cooling off the air. It's really only needed, if you're wet blasting, it doesn't matter if you have wet air going into the pot, you got a pot full of water anyway. But if you are dry blasting, or if you're going to paint from their unit, you need to make sure you turn the fan on. On the outbound side of the fan, it's going to go over to the moisture trap. These moisture traps, it's not just a tank. It does have stainless steel mesh inside of it that'll collect all the water molecules and allow them to drop down out of the bottom. There's a drain port over here. It's a good idea because most guys, if you're like me, you'll forget to open this thing and drain it periodically. Just crack it open just a bit. You're not going to miss that little bit of air volume. But what that'll do is it'll never allow this canister to fill up with water. On this water pump, these little mini regulators, they're preset. They should be around about 80 psi. That water pump can handle way over, well over 100 psi. There's just no reason to overinflate the diaphragms. They're rubber diaphragms. We set it between 80 to 90 psi. If you happen to uncouple here and use this regulator for your paint setup, just make sure that you dial it back up to 80 psi to get that 48 gallons per minute out of the pump. This is the control hose that comes from that mini regulator going to the water pump. There are torque settings for every one of these bolts. It's a good idea, after about 10-20 hours to go back through these and reset the torque just so you're not losing any air inside the water pump body itself. Once the compressor is on and warmed up and you've opened the service valve to send air to everything, you'll notice pressure on the top liquid fill gauge. Now's a good time to go ahead and crack that valve open on the bottom of the moisture trap. And you can just crack it open a bit just till you hear air coming out. That's plenty right there. Just as long as the air can come out, water can too. There's this filter regulator on the left-hand side of your control box. There's also a little drain valve on the bottom. Just leave it cracked open like you do on the moisture trap at the bottom so it always continuously drains out. That way this bowl never fills up with water and carries over into your Parker valve. So also on the left-hand side of your control box, you'll notice a small brass petcock valve that has a hose attached going to the vibrator. But what will happen over time, buildup of abrasive residual, it could change the harmonics of the pot a bit. And what you can do if you notice that the system isn't feeding right or feeding like it did when it was new, you can adjust this little brass petcock valve, start turning it off just a bit, slows this ball down inside the vibrator and allows that pot to rattle more. At the end of the day, when you're done, using it for the day, just because you're trying to extend the life of your pinch hose, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and hit this little bleeder button and get that pressure off of the pinch valve so it's not always compressing the pinch hose. Tomorrow when you go to start the machine back up, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to go back closed before you even pressurize the pot. So it's a good idea to just hit that bleeder button and get that air pressure off of that guillotine valve. This is only something you want to do after you've shut down everything else. There's no pressure in the pot. All that's evacuated, you're depressurized, you're getting ready to roll up and go home. Just hit that button. Just don't do it with pressure in the pot, otherwise the machine will blast. Maintenance on the pressure regulator. You've got a steel rod in here against an aluminum body. There's rarely a time when you have to go down in pressure. Unless the part's really small, you just have to be close to it. It's better practice to adjust with standoff distance. But that being said, it's a good idea maybe once a month, just back this knob out. Lubricate this screw in here just so that way it doesn't ever seize up. It's always easy to turn. If you're adjusting it on a daily basis, really no need to, but I would keep some kind of lithium grease, or never seize something of that sort on the threads of this adjustment screw. Lastly, we want to talk about flushing the pot out. It's something that gets overlooked pretty regular. But it's a good idea going back to the harmonics of the pot and build up on the inside walls. What will happen, that water level coming up and down, eventually the stuff will start falling off the walls of this pot. It could land down there at the bottom of the pot where the outlet pipe is. Part of preventative maintenance, maybe once a month, to go ahead and drop this bottom flange, pull the inlet nozzle out and just get a water hose and rinse it out really well. That way you avoid any kind of flow issues at the nozzle. You always have a smooth and consistent blast pattern.